Hey guys, this is Alfred back with another video, and in today's video I just want to talk about the 4.8 tier list I've made for Genshin Impact. And this is a tier list based on the meta. How I rate each character is basically I rate them based on what they're very good at. So for example, Kokomi is a healer, so I rate her as a healer rather than a damage dealer. So once again, this is my opinions on the best characters in the meta right now. So if you have differing opinions, feel free to comment down below in the comments. What will you change in this tier list and where you will put each characters. And just for a disclaimer, all these characters are at constellation 0, so if they power spike at a certain constellation, I will mention them. But right now this is a tier list for C0. And lastly, before we begin this video, there will be very minimal edits, so feel free to listen along in the background while you do other stuff. And also I will briefly talk about every single character, but not much in detail except for some. With all that out of the way, let's begin with this video. So at the top of S tier, it's gonna be Furina. Furina is literally the best character in the game right now because of the amount of hydro application she provides and the amount of damage amplification she gives with her fanfare. This makes her one of the best characters in the game. And because she's hydro, she can be played in 99% of teams, and the best team she can be played with right now is Hyper Bloom, which is a very good way of dealing damage right now in the Abyss. And if you think of a very good support, you would always think of Furina. She is the strongest hydro and pretty much the strongest character in the game in my opinion right now. And alongside her, we have Neuvillette, who is the standalone DPS in the S+ tier. To give you a retrospective of how strong Neuvillette is, MiHoYo literally made the Abyss harder because of Neuvillette. If you don't believe me, there's a lot of videos out there where Neuvillette is literally just nuking and obliterating the Spiral Abyss with his spinning tactic. So you can just spin your camera around and deal a lot of damage. And this is why Neuvillette is so strong. And especially because he synergized very well with Furina's fanfare stacks, Neuvillette will definitely be at the top as long as Furina is at the top with him as well. The next character in the S tier is going to be Nahida. Nahida is the best Dendro support in the game. I've literally used Nahida ever since she has came out in version 3.2 if I'm not wrong. If you want a very strong Dendro applier, Nahida is your way to go. Beside Nahida, we have Kazuha. He has fallen off a bit. I used to think Kazuha was the best support in the game until the release of Furina. Then Kazuha has really fallen off. Right now in the meta, some enemies just cannot be grouped at all, so that is why Kazuha has fallen off a bit. But don't get me wrong, his damage amplification is very strong, and if you run him in non-Hyper Bloom teams, let's say a Vaporized team, a Freeze team, etc., he will still do very well because of his damage amplification with his swirl. So this is why Kazuha is still at the top, although not the best character in the game right now. And last in my opinion is Raiden Shogun. This one is quite debatable because at C0 you can argue she is not S+ tier and maybe S tier. In my opinion, if you cannot beat certain floors in the Spiral Abyss, you literally just run the Raiden Shogun national team, which is Raiden Shogun with Zhongli, Bennett, and Xingqiu, and you will still beat it. So the team which has come out very long ago is still one of the best in the game right now, and it's a very budget-friendly team because you just need Raiden Shogun and you just need her 3 4-star characters. And the best part is, if you have Raiden Shogun at C2, she's definitely much higher than the other characters, but because she's at C0, she will stay at S+ and at the bottom of S+ tier. Next, we have the S tier. We have Kokomi and Baizhu, the 2 5-star healers that we have that are very strong. And the reason why Kokomi and Baizhu are at the top is because their healing is absurd and it's very strong, especially in Hyper Bloom teams that want to use Furina. In case you didn't know, fanfare revolves around how much your health goes up and down, so Furina will drain your HP and you need healers who can keep up with Furina's drain of HP, and this is where Kokomi and Baizhu do very well. Because their element is Hydro and Dendro, it really synergizes very well in Hyper Bloom teams, making them the best supportive healers in the game right now. Just beside them, we have Yelan. Yelan is a very strong Hydro application. In my opinion, if you run her in teams which attack very fast, she will apply more Hydro than Furina. But the reason why she isn't as good is because she is a sub DPS and not a full support like Furina, who just amplifies damage for your main DPS. This is why she isn't as strong, but she still provides a lot of Hydro application, which is why she is at S tier. Beside her, we have Navia. Navia is the Geo DPS. In my opinion, she is the strongest Geo DPS. If you run her with Furina and Bennett, she will literally blast and obliterate your opponents in the Spiral Abyss. The only reason why I don't rate her so high, if you play against an enemy who is immune to Geo, she won't be doing any damage at all. So that is why she isn't as good. And lastly, is because she's Geo, her element doesn't synergize with other elements other than Crystallize, which is the mechanic she used. So she does not abuse the Bond of Life mechanic. She does not abuse Hyper Bloom. That is why she isn't at the top of S tier. Beside Navia, we have the Dendro Kaching Alhaitham. Aggravate is still a very good way of doing damage, so this is why Alhaitham is still on top. You can run Alhaitham in Hyper Bloom teams as well. This is why Alhaitham is just one of the better DPS in the game right now. He just does a lot more damage than Kaching, so this is why he is S tier. And finally, at the bottom of S tier, who can easily be on top as well, we have the two Pyro Queens, Arlecchino and Hu Tao. It's only fair you put them side by side because Hu Tao, her damage has recently increased because you run her with Furina, who can easily drain her HP, making Hu Tao very strong. And Arlecchino is pretty much the same as Hu Tao. Because of the Bond of Life, she's able to do a lot of damage, and you can easily run her with Furina, who will also further amplify Arlecchino's damage, making her very strong. And Arlecchino actually does a lot of damage even without supports. This is the reason why I put her S tier alongside Hu Tao. And you can argue Hu Tao could be better than Arlecchino, but in my opinion, I still feel like Arlecchino is just stronger than Hu Tao. Next, at the top of A tier, we have Zhongli, and some people might argue Zhongli can be S tier. In my opinion, yes, Zhongli can easily be an S tier, but the thing is, Zhongli is a comfort character. You don't really need Zhongli in order to clear the abyss, but for teams that struggle to survive, and if you need a little bit of damage amplification, you can run Zhongli in that case. He is a Geo character, so that is the main reason why a lot of people don't use him, because Geo doesn't synergize very well with Aggravate, and she doesn't really synergize very well with Hyper Bloom. But in teams that can run Zhongli and teams that want Zhongli, he is definitely very good and can easily be S tier as well. Next, besides Zhongli, we have the three Musketeers of Cryo, which is Ayaka, Ganyu, and Ryo. These three characters, they have fallen off a bit because right now the meta isn't really made for freeze. But don't get me wrong, if there is a freeze meta and there has been a surge in Cryo buffs, then these three characters will be very strong. But right now, there are some bosses that just can't be frozen at all, and this is why they have fallen off. But don't get me wrong, their damage numbers are still insane, especially for Ganyu, who can be played in quick swap teams, so that is why they're at A tier together. Beside them, we have Cloren. Cloren is the new Electro main DPS in the game, and right now she is the best Electro character for Hyper Bloom alongside with Raiden Shogun. The main reason why she is very strong is because she synergizes very well with Furina and her fanfare stacks, and the fact that she abuses Bond of Life to do damage as well makes her a top tier character right now. And beside her, we have Yaimiko. Yaimiko is just a very strong Hyper Bloom sub DPS, and she is a very comfortable character. I've used Yaimiko a lot in the overworld and in the abyss, and in my opinion, she's just a very good Hyper Bloom Electro character overall, making her at the top of A tier. And the last A tier character we have is Ayato. Ayato is a Hydro character, Hydro DPS. In my opinion, I want to put him at B tier, but the Ayato soup team is just way too strong, which is Ayato, Bennett, Fischl, and Kazuha. He will do a lot of damage in the abyss, and he still does very well just because he's Hydro, and you can definitely play him in Hyper Bloom teams as well. Next, at the top of B tier, we have Nilo. The reason why Nilo isn't rated as high is because Nilo has a team building constraint where she only can synergize with Hydro and Dendro. The moment you put another element in the team, she loses her special bloom, which does more damage and explodes much faster. But don't get me wrong, in an abyss where you can use Nilo, she can easily be S tier because her clear speed is insane. But when you can't use Nilo in abyss, she isn't very good outside of it, so this is why she's at B tier. Next, we have Yoimiya. Yoimiya has fallen off as well because there are not a lot of enemies which are flying around in the abyss right now. Right now, the abyss is damage checked, so Yoimiya vape teams have kind of fallen off. But don't get me wrong, the moment the abyss start introducing flying enemies again, people will be wishing they have Yoimiya. Beside Yoimiya, we have the Anemo family. Let's start with Wanderer. Wanderer, in my opinion, is more of an enabler than a DPS, but he still does a lot of damage. Just play him with a taser team and you will see the amount of damage he does. So in my opinion, Wanderer is in that B tier. Alongside with Wanderer, we have Xiao and Xian Yun. If you want to play Xiao, you'll be most likely playing Xian Yun to support him in his plunge damage, so that is the way it is. Now the problem with Xiao right now is that because he doesn't abuse Bond of Life and he doesn't synergize very well with Hyper Bloom, it's very hard to put him in the abyss, and in order to make him work as well, you need a lot of setup, not only from his teammates but for Xiao himself. In order to start the next floor, you need to make sure he has enough energy, and to do that it's quite hard and sometimes might jeopardize your run. This is why I put him at B tier alongside with Shen Yun. And finally, the last Anemo character in that list is Venti. Now he suffers the same problem as Kazuha, where enemies just can't be grouped as much anymore in the abyss, and because his main selling point is grouping, he doesn't have a lot of damage amplification other than Swirl. This is why she is B tier alongside his Anemo family. Beside them, we have Sidgewin. I thought Sidgewin will be as good as Kokomi, but sadly she just isn't as good. In the overworld, Sidgewin is so much better because you can trap enemies in her bubble, but in the Spiral Abyss, you can't really trap the big enemies in her bubble, and using her ult is actually a DPS loss because you'd rather just use her DPS dealing damage instead of using Sidgewin's ult, and that is why she is at B tier and not at top at all. And besides Sidgewin, we have Tartaglia. Tartaglia, if you are very good at playing Tartaglia and you have a very good team, you have a very good mastery of how much damage he can dish out and his specific combos, he can easily be at the top of A tier. But the problem is you need a very strong setup for Tartaglia, similar to Xiao, and you really need to have a very good grasp of his mechanics, because the longer you take in his stance, the longer you need to wait for him to use his form again. And Tartaglia's damage literally just comes from his stance, so if you are waiting very long for his stance, you are just losing DPS and you're going to be losing stars in the Abyss. This is why he is at B tier. And last, at the bottom of B tier, we have the fellow Geo characters. You can easily put Ito on top of Shiori. Shiori has some use with her Geo application, which can be better than Albedo, and you can easily put Shiori at C tier as well. Beside her, we have Ito, who is not as good as Navia. In my opinion, if you have Navia, I don't see a reason why you should be playing Ito. Ito is good at clearing single target bosses, but if you're using Ito, you might as well just use Navia, who can clear the bosses much faster. So this is why Ito has really fallen off. And now at C tier, we have the standard better characters like Mona and Jean, who've just fallen off. Before the release of Farina, I've used Mona a lot, especially in my freeze team, but now with the release of Farina, I'm very sad to see that Mona has fallen off. Obviously in speedruns and in domains especially, Mona is much stronger because you can clear the domains much faster, but in Spiral Abyss, she isn't as good anymore. If you don't have Farina, you can still use Mona, but sadly she has just been replaced by Farina. And Jean, the only best team I've seen for Jean is Sunfire Jean. Outside of that, she isn't as good of a healer as Kokomi and Baiju. This is why she is at C tier. Tinari, I thought will be a good Dendro DPS, but sadly he's more of a quick swap DPS and he doesn't even do much damage in that quick swap team. This is why he's at C tier. Alongside Tinari, we have Sino Kaching, who are pretty much similar in damage levels. Sino still does more damage than Kaching at C0. This is why they are positioned as such. And the reason why they're so clunky is because their damage isn't consistent like Yaimiko and Raiden Shogun. This is why they are the bottom of C tier alongside with Klee as well. Klee doesn't do as much damage as Yoimiya in my opinion, because Klee can't even do well against flying enemies. This is why Klee is just at the bottom right now, because Pyro is just not in a good spot unless you're Arlecchino or Hu Tao. Beside Klee, we have Albedo. Albedo is just the budget version of Chiori. Chiori still does more damage outside than Albedo. If you don't have a Geo construct in your team, Albedo is just much better than Chiori, but teams that run Chiori want to run Geo anyway, so that is why Chiori is just so much better than Albedo. Beside her, we have Shenhe, and if you're asking me why I position Shenhe at C tier and not along with her prior characters at A tier, is because Shenhe is a premium unit and you don't need Shenhe to run a freeze team. To give you perspective, the previous freeze team I used is Kazuha, Mona, Ayaka, and Diona. I use Diona more than Shenhe because Diona can provide a lot of cryo elemental particles for your main DPS, and it can really solve the problem of ulting, especially for Ayaka, who has a very high energy requirement. That is why I use Diona more than Shenhe. But don't get me wrong, Shenhe can provide much more damage. She's much more of a premium character that if you have, you can use. If not, she's not needed at all. Next, we have Emilie and Dea for burning, and sadly right now, burning is not very good in the meta. There are a few characters that can burn like Toma and Dea, and now with the release of Emilie, you can include her as well. But MiHoYo has not done much in promoting burning, whether it's the Spiral Beast buffs or just the amount of characters and the pool of characters you can use for burning. So right now they are at C tier, but with the release of Natalan, I hope burning will be much better and much stronger so that we can use burning as well in the Spiral Abyss. And finally, at the bottom of C tier, we have Eula, who can easily be D tier as well. Eula used to be very good. She is the queen of physical DPS, but sadly physical just isn't at a very good spot in the Abyss right now, because Hoyo is really pushing the usage and the synergy of elements together. This is why physical isn't as good. Hopefully in the release of Sneshnaya or Natalan, the last two regions, hopefully there will be an increase in physical damage, but right now it's not the case. And lastly, at D tier, we have the three characters. Let's talk about Chi-Chi. Chi-Chi could easily be at the bottom, but I put her at the top of D tier because with the release teams of Chlorent. There is actually a team called the Chi-Chi Chlorent team where you run Skyward Blade on your Chlorent and you play Chi-Chi alongside Furina in order for Chlorent to abuse the Fanfare stacks because her HP will be going constantly up and down with her Bond of Life. So that is a team you can use Chi-Chi with, but sadly it's not even the strongest Chlorent team because the strongest Chlorent team is the Hyper Bloom Chlorent. Obviously, even with the usage of Chi-Chi in Chlorent team, that isn't even Chlorent's best team. So that is why she's still D tier in my opinion. She just is not very good and she cannot keep up with the best healers in the game. Next we have Diluc. Diluc's strongest team is the Plunge Diluc along with Shen Yun. So if you really want to use Diluc, I recommend you use him with Shen Yun and you just do a Plunge team. But the problem is if you don't have Shen Yun at all, the next best team you can use him is a Vape team. So this is why he's at D tier. And the fact that he's a Claymore user means that his damage is very slow, and that is why I'm very sorry for Diluc mains. He is at D tier right now. He used to be at the top, but look how my boy has fallen all the way to D tier. And the last character in the list, we're coming to the very end, is Aloy. Aloy is just a 4-star character. Like, she is a 5-star in paper, but her stats is literally 4-star and she just feels like a 4-star in general. So sadly, she is at the bottom of D tier. And people who do not have Aloy are not missing out at all, because even as a 4-star character, in my book, she is not as good as a 4-star at all and might be the only 3-star character in the game. And with that, thank you guys so much for listening and watching till the end of this video. If you like videos like this, please do leave a like. It shows me I should do more. Comment down below what you will change in this tier list. Definitely you guys will have different opinions, so please comment down below what you will change. And finally, do subscribe. It's free. You can unsubscribe later on. I will be doing more videos like this in the future. Definitely I will be doing more tier lists in the future. At the end of every region, I'll be talking more about the characters and the overall change in the meta. And with that, I will see you guys next time. Peace.